Welcome to Into Theology. I'm joined with Dr. Matthew Hoskin of Thunder Bay fame. And he's famous there, of course.
So much fame.
Yes, when he walks everywhere, people gasp in awe at him, partly because of this podcast. In fact, the whole city is alight with excitement about Boethius and his Consolation of Philosophy. And we would never want to say consolations in the plural of philosophy, but the consolation singular of philosophy. And we're jumping into book 4 today. I'm not sure that we'll finish it because there's a lot to it. And we only pre-reviewed the beginning part of it together. But there's a really interesting thing that you wanted to open us up by reading, because I think it was page 327, right?
Yes.
And why it's interesting is, you'll find out, but essentially the argument is that evil men do not exist.
Yeah. So here we go. Evil men do not exist. And this indeed may seem strange to some, that we should say of evil men, who are the majority of mankind, that they do not exist. But that is how things are. For of those who are evil, I do not deny that they are evil, but that they are, purely and simply, I do deny. For as you would say that a corpse was a dead man, but you could not call it simply a man, so I concede of the vicious that they are indeed evil, but I cannot admit that they are absolutely. For that is which keeps its order and preserves its nature. And whatever falls from this also abandons being, which is dependent on its nature. But evil men, you will say, are able to do things. Not even I would deny that. But this ability of theirs is derived not from their strength, but from their weakness. For they can do evil things, which they would not be able to do, had they been able to persevere in the performance of good things. And that ability they do have shows more clearly that they could really do nothing. For if, as we concluded just now, evil is nothing, since they can only do evil, it is obvious that the wicked can do nothing.
Oof. I don't remember if it's in this book, but I remember reading Boethius in connection to this argument, saying evil men who seek power and so on, there's a sense in which that is a weakness and not a strength. It's the same sort of idea as here. And it's a weakness because they actually can't attain goodness. Maybe I'll let you handle this part, and I can give some notes too, but can you explain a little bit more about what he is saying? How is it that evil men do not exist, even though they do in fact do things?
They do in fact do things, but they do not exist. Yeah. So this is I think this is a really exciting passage because it forces you to think quite a bit and work your way through what is going on. But we have to it extends actually from an earlier argument, which is that evil is nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a classic argument that you will find in St. Augustine, you will find it in St. Athanasius, and you'll find it amongst the pagans with Plato. And it really makes sense, and you have to start there. Evil is nothing. And you may think, well, evil seems to be something to me, seems pretty strong, but evil is nothing but the lack of good, right?
Right.
And an evil act is, say, a murder, for example, is nothing inasmuch as it is the cessation. It is the bringing about of the cessation of someone's life. It is not a positive act. It is a taking away. Right. And that is what evil generally is. It is a distortion of the good or an attempt to remove the good. It is like, for us today who look up into the sky and see the darkness, it is like the black bits between the stars. It is a nothing. So it is how a shadow, in a sense, is nothing, in that it is simply the lack of where light falls, is what a shadow is. The shadow isn't actually there. It is simply that light is not there that makes the shadow. And so it is with evil. And when I was reading this just now, two moments in Christian theology sort of emerged from me. All these theologians whose names begin with A, of course, Athanasius, who I have a deep appreciation for.
I named one of my sons after him.
Wow, that's so cool.
And I have another son named after Ambrose of Milan. Ambrose is his name.
Nice. Is Athanasius, or is that like his middle name?
Athan is what we call him.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Because
But
I
his
know
name after Athanasius. Yeah. His middle. Well, I don't know if I want to give all the personal information as I think about it
let's
last time.
not. And his
His
date of
name.
birth. Write this down.
Yeah, yeah. His name is, in a sense, Athanasius Stephanus, which is Crown of
Okay.
Immortality, which is the
Cool.
crown that Blandina and Ignatius of Antioch gained through their witness to the end.
Very
By the way,
good.
one day we should into theology episodes on the martyrdom in Lugdunum, the story of that probably
Yeah.
Irenaeus or someone records like Irenaeus, and in
Hmm.
particular pay particular attention to Blandina, who's my favorite. I wanted to name one of my kids after Blandina, but my wife was. I have two daughters. We can't go Blandina.
There's a reason theologically minded men need wives.
Yeah, they help with the names. But on topic for a second, and we can go off
Yes.
topic one more moment. I know you're talking about Athanasius and all that, and I probably cut you off, but
Go
hold
ahead.
on to that for a second. I think I was actually thinking the passage was actually in the prior pages, because one of the interesting things he'll say in page 323 is near the bottom. He has some propositions, and he says, "The good are powerful, but the evil are weak." And what he's getting at is something quite profound, that there's a fundamental impotence in the literal sense of powerlessness in those who pursue evil, because they are those who are overcome by vice, ignorance of what is good, and inordinate desire, and they become, as 325 says, frail because of their lack of self-control. So these could very well be people who have a robust stature, appear strong, appear confident, but because they are ignorant of the good, and if they're not ignorant of the good, they lack self control to do the good, they are frail and weak and impotent. They don't have the power to do what is, and in fact, they're overcome by what is not. For as Paul says, I think in 1 Timothy 4, everything God created is good and can be made holy with prayer and thanksgiving, something to that effect. And yet, if you pursue what is not good, you're pursuing something that God did not create. And that is, we might say that I think a lot of people talk about this is you're actually choosing something according to the mode of will that is not, but that only exists insofar as your will exists in your choice. And that is you're choosing something that God only created good things. So you're choosing something that is not what God created it to be, whether in origin or in telos. And you are therefore either ignorant of what is the good, powerless to gain the good through lack of self-control, or out of some other impotence, and therefore you are weak and frail. I think that's just an interesting argument, which leads into what you read, namely that evil men do not exist because they lack being. And being here is, there's probably lots of ways you can define it, but I think the most simple way that I can think about it is being is what God made you to be.
I like that.
And if you're not doing what God made you to be, you are not.
Yes. And this in fact is, we would say, the flip side of what we were talking about in book 3, that in book 3 there's this whole beautiful passage about how since God is happiness and God is good, he is self-sufficient, he is perfect, he is all of these things. If you are pursuing happiness, you are in a sense God by participation. That you are participating in his life to the extent that you're pursuing true happiness through those ends. Therefore, the flip side is, if you are pursuing not those things, you are not participating in God, and you're turning away from God, who is himself being itself, which was actually my Athanasius point anyway. So it's in Boethius. It's just in Athanasius is against the heathen. He goes into the fact that we have fallen away from the true life and the true source of all being. And in turning away from him, we are turning towards the opposite of him. So we're turning towards death and towards non-being, which is the problem that he goes on to discuss in On the Incarnation. So it's sort of like a pure Christian version of what Boethius is getting at in his more philosophical way.
Mm.
And part of this then moves into evil men want to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy, right? Like this is really what we pursue. But you can only achieve happy by pursuing the good. And so if you're pursuing evil, you are powerless to achieve your end, because your end can only be achieved by pursuing the opposite of what you're doing. And so evil men are the weakest of them all.
By the way, there's Athanasius up in this corner, right? I don't know if
Well,
you can see it. You can't really see it that well, but
beautiful.
I think that's really helpful and powerful. I think everyone wants happiness but can't attain it. Is it what is who sings the song? I can't get no satisfaction. I'm reminded of a lot of like these rock songs that are about wanting and desiring but never actually being satisfied with what you have. And it is sort of a human thing to strive after that which you can't attain because it is movable, changeable, and not temporal. And it strikes me that one of the characteristics of that which is imperfect and less than the perfect good is that which
Hmm.
can be lost. I think Boethius actually makes that point earlier on. When it comes to, I mean, it's interesting. Boethius has a really strong view on they don't exist. I think Augustine is a little bit more. He seems to be slightly more nuanced than as I see Boethius right here. But I think if I remember correctly, in the pear tree event, that original sin of Augustine at the first tree before his conversion at the tree of life in Milan is this idea that even when you're pursuing nothing, the a great act of evil, there's no good thing in it. It's no thing because it's not a good because God didn't create it to be that way. You can still be pursuing it because you're attempting to find some good thing, like maybe through friendship, for example. Your friends are
Hmm.
like through the goodness of the good of friendship is being perverted or corrupted, so that you are pursuing no things. There's even a sense in which even our pursuit of nothingness is sometimes is sort of attached to this notional idea of pursuing something that's good or happy generating.
Yeah, and I think it is, and I think this is also nuanced later on by Aquinas, isn't it? Because he gets into the whole question of God as being and God as good, and so what do we do with demons? And he says, well, inasmuch as demons exist, to that extent they are good, even if
Mm-hmm.
every single thing they do counts as evil, because God ultimately is being. Anything, because you can't actually do things if you don't actually exist, right?
Right.
Like that. So I think Boethius must be being deliberately provocative and saying that evil men do not exist. You could say that their evil actions don't exist,
That's
right?
how I teach Augustine, and I usually explain it that way. That existence itself is goodness. So like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Calvin who makes this argument. Actually, it might be Aquinas. I can't remember, but the very act of exist. Well, actually, it might be Ferdinand Ulrich. Now I think about it. In his Homo, I think, man, it's late at night for me when we're recording this, but it might be from this book that I just can't remember. Homo Boethius by Ferdinand Ulrich. But basically, the very act of a God out of the depth of God's love, he is giving of himself in the very act of essay to all people existence, and the fact that even evil, we might say evil men, exist is still a gift of God's self-annihilating love. But their choices and their activities are nothing and destructive towards not their choices. I think in the language of Gregory of Nyssa towards non-being, which is kind of what I think for someone like a Nyssa, memory serves. Hell is sort of like the perpetual choice of non-being. It is the because if being is goodness, it is the perpetual and long-term choice of non-being and non-goodness. Which I know Nissa has some interesting views on eternal punishment, but
Yes.
let's just skip over that
Yeah.
part.
But then if evil is its own punishment,
Ooh,
ooh,
ooh, it's as
then
if there might be
maybe.
more to say about that.
Indeed.
On
So
page, what was it, 333? I can't remember what he said.
333 is where we talk about evil being its own punishment.
Do you want to read that section? We can then discuss it again like the last one. Because I think it's
Yeah.
gonna have a cool little thing. It's in the middle of 333. And good, maybe start the goodness, because goodness is the reward and evil is the punishment.
Here we go. I'm just looking for it. Okay, so since I'm just going to start it. Since his goodness confers, this is like the fourth line towards the top of 333. Since his goodness confers on each man his reward, he will only lack it when he has ceased to be good. Lastly, since every reward is sought after because it is believed to be good, who will judge one who possesses the good to be without his reward? But what reward? The greatest and fairest of all. For remember that corollary which I gave you a little time ago as an excellent present, and conclude thus. Since the good itself is happiness, it is clear that all good men are made happy for this reason, that they are good. But those who are happy, it is agreed, are gods. And therefore, that is the reward of good men, which no time can lessen, no man's power diminish, no man's wickedness obscure, to become gods. These things being so far so for good men, no wise man can doubt either of the punishment inseparable from evil men. For since good and evil and also punishment and reward are directly opposite to one another, what we see added in the case of the good man's reward must necessarily be reflected in an opposite manner in the case of the evil man's punishment. As therefore goodness is itself the reward for good men, so for wicked men, wickedness is itself the punishment. And this actually is worth pointing out. It actually goes on to say, whoever is punished is in no doubt that he is afflicted with evil.
Yeah, I think that's a cool line. Whoever is punished is in no doubt that he is afflicted with evil.
And I think it's just, this is an important thing to think about, because one of the problems that Boethius is addressing in this is the fact that evil men, and we see, the psalmist cries out against this in Psalm 73, evil men seem to go unpunished all the time. And so what we learn here is that their evil is itself their punishment. And in fact, later on in the argument, or maybe not later on, somewhere else in the book anyway, Lady Philosophy argues that if you were to punish evil men by temporal means, there is a chance that through that punishment, they can become good men. So actually there is a sense in which it's good for them to be punished. Like it's good for them that they be punished in order that they might become good. And so then you feeling like they deserve retribution doesn't necessarily get the vengeful... It's you're not wrong, but it actually isn't evil for them. The most evil thing they could suffer isn't retribution from God or from the magistrate, but actually to continue in their evil is the thing that is the most evil unto them.
And there's also the opening of the chapter, he basically says, this is my greatest grief, that although there does exist a good ruler of the universe established in the last chapter, evil can exist at all and even pass unpunished. So it seems like at least a theme of this chapter is, how is it that evil, in what mode does evil exist in, and why does it seem to go unpunished? And part of the answer to that question is that you pursue something because it'll make you happy. So the attainment of what you're pursuing makes you the good thing makes you happy. And you're actually called a god, like you have divine-like quality through that. But the contrary is also true. If you're pursuing something that's evil, you gain evil, and that's its own punishment. But here's what's really interesting. I want to just quickly backpedal to something that I noticed when you were reading. He says, but those who are happy, it is agreed, are called gods. That's from the last chapter, if memory serves true, the last book, rather. And therefore, that is the reward of good men. Here's the key, which no time can lessen, no man's power diminish, no man's wickedness obscure to become gods. Here's something that's incredibly, I think, helpful, and it's in Boethius. I just taught, like I said, on almost 3 hour, like a 2.5 hour class on Revelation. There is something about the world in which we live in where evil people seem to go unpunished and have success, and you feel like you're powerless and unable to do anything. But Boethius tells you 2 things in this situation when people are more powerful and yet maybe more evil than you, and you have seemingly less power and are doing the right thing without reward. One is, they're the ones who are impotent because they are subdued by evil. If you have self-control to be good even when you don't have good so-called results, you're actually the one who has power. Secondly, they can't do anything to you because you already have the reward, namely goodness itself, and it makes you godlike. Whereas they who maybe presume to have power are as far from God as they can be, because they're pursuing no thing, and God is being itself. They're pursuing non-being through evil, and God is being. God is goodness. God is truth. God is beauty. He is that which attracts, because goodness and beauty attract that which is, to return to from where it came. So there's some interesting things happening here that I think could be incredibly encouraging when you feel like, I think of like living in Canada where none of us seem to have money, can't own homes, government seems to keep messing up. Whatever happens at the next election, will it actually fix anything? World empires are shaking the world up right now, and you feel incredibly
It keeps snowing in April.
Keeps snowing in April. And yet, I'm reminded of someone like Epictetus, who's I think a 1st century Latin Stoic, Roman Stoic. And he's, all you can do is really control what is in you. And it's slightly more complicated than that. But at the end of the day, if you're pursuing what is good and you can gain that, then that is your reward, and you are more godlike, you are more powerful, and you are more strong than those who, through unrighteous gain, are pursuing evil, have perceived power, destructive power, and yet they themselves are in evil and are experiencing the punishment, which is evil itself, and are impotent to overcome it. It's just, again, different perspective. It's a perspective not so much on the externals, but on what is most true, which is usually most invisible, because truth is metaphysical.
Yes. And all of this has brought to mind, I just got my author's copy of Tolkien Among the Theologians.
Ooh.
Edited by Austin Freeman. I contributed the Boethius chapter.
Nice.
And this is, I draw on book 4 of the Consolation extensively, and in that I talk about Theoden and Denethor as two examples of power and weakness, and how Denethor, as steward of Minas Tirith, is actually in worldly power the more powerful, and yet he is, in truth, the weaker of the two men, because he has succumbed to despair, which is itself a form of evil. Whereas Theoden, after Gandalf comes in, simply proclaims to him the truth. There's no magic like in the movie, right? Gandalf comes and he just tells Theoden things that are true, and Theoden believes them and discovers he has had strength all along. Becomes powerful enough to lead a war force against the enemy, and to die a glorious death. But no one can take away the goodness and the power that Theoden had, whereas Denethor dies in despair, believing that all is lost. And Gandalf even says to Denethor that I have no words for those who despair. That true despair, setting aside like modern clinical depression and being in a bad mood, actual true despair, which does grip some people, it's like it is a sin and there's nothing you can do about it. And my third example I didn't have room for in the book because they limit your word count.
But now you do.
Now I do! Let me tell you about Saruman and how he also is weak.
Did you say Saruman or Soromon? Sorry. Bad joke.
Saruman. Sharky, right? This guy who goes from being the most powerful in the council to weaker than Gandalf in actual terms of, his power, his angelic power, to just an old man who gets murdered.
Right.
Like he goes from being one of the most powerful beings on Middle-earth who commands thousands to running the Shire with gangs and then getting just murdered, stabbed. And because he was pursuing evil, he abandoned his own goal. And so it just sort of went, for me, I don't know, I'm the kind of guy who likes to read a book or two and see those things play out. And that, I think, is a really Boethius in action.
Repertoire may be slightly less sophisticated. I'm reminded of Call the Conqueror, who... Or
Love
is it
Call.
Conan, or is it Conan the Barbarian? When there's a phrase, it's like, live by the axe, die by the axe. Just like something like that. Or is it the sword? And there is a sense in which if you live a violent life, you might actually die a violent death. And if you live by evil, you'll probably encounter evil people. If you're a gangster, you'll probably be having negative things happen to you over and over again. It's not a great way to live, actually, at the end of the day. My literary repertoire was slightly less sophisticated. Is it called The Conqueror? I can't remember.
It could be called... I haven't read it since I was a teenager. I haven't read Cull since then. Not that I have... Just to say, I read Sword and Sorcery. I just haven't read Cull for that long. I've been reading Conan lately.
That was kind of Jesus from Matthew, but there's also this... I'm looking it up right now. Call the Conqueror. It's either Call the Conqueror or Conan. It's one of them.
I mean, because Conan's the guy with the sword, right? And Cull's the guy with the axe. There's less Cull out there, right? If you assemble all of Robert E. Howard's Cull stories, it takes up one small trade, not even a trade, mass market paperback.
To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. Yeah, that's good.
That's Conan. That is not, dear listeners, that is not the good life. That is not actually the means of attaining happiness. That is not what is best in life, despite
the fact that it is words that are said in a... I'm not sure if it's just from the movie or if it's from the books, but those are words.
Those are words.
Do we need to say something else about consolation? Or should we do... Actually, into theology's next episode needs to be Call the Conqueror, the great literary achievement.
All right, we'll do... Although, to be fair, I mean, we've done Tolkien Among the Theologians. Well, we haven't, but theological people do this all the time. Tolkien all the time. There is a part of me that wants to, actually take sword and sorcery seriously, and... I mean, there's a reason that the word sorcery is in the name of the genre, and what are the theological undercurrents, and all that sort of thing. Like Conan and Cull, and...
Theology of Call the Conqueror.
Theology of Cull the Conqueror.
Conan and the snake cults.
Go.
False doom, false god. Is there anything else that we needed? I can't remember. We had some pre-talk. Do we have another topic we're gonna say before we close down? My brain is.
Yeah,
I
your
have
brain
been
is.
talking for hours.
I think it depends if we want to do another round on Consolation 4. Because if
I
we
think we
do.
should probably do another one on 4 because I didn't have
'Cause it's so
time to
long.
really go through like especially the last portion here.
Yeah. We
Like
have
the
barely
celestial
touched the
motions
first half.
by angelic power and demons' ingenuity. That's cool.
So, I
Fate,
think we're
providence.
good here. We can tantalize everyone that coming up we're going to talk about George MacDonald.
Ooh.
So, from
And the
Tolkien in
unmoving
this
simplicity
episode,
of
George
Providence.
MacDonald in the next. But yeah, we're not going to talk about George MacDonald in Providence though, unless we want to. I was mostly going to talk about the Princess and Curdie.
Nice. Isn't it? Didn't he write the Goblin and the was it again?
Yeah, so there's the Princess and the Goblin, and then the Princess and Curdie, and the Princess and Curdie has some strong Boethius going on.
You know, it's sad. My daughters read those, and I think I might have started them. I've never actually read them. I think I may have looked at them. I need to change this fast.
So,
I have read. I can't remember the story. It's a book, and the entire premise is a man with an axe, and he's standing on a wall, and there's like barbarians coming, and he attacks him with an axe, and it's an entire book, and that's the entire premise. My wife mocked me relentlessly for reading it, and I was like, "What's going to happen next?"
is he going to fight off barbarians with an axe next? Is that?
That's what happened next.
Wow. Yeah.
And
You know what?
anyways, Boethius, evil men do not exist. They pursue no thing, which is
They
nothing,
pursue.
non-being.